So I think for the good life, it means to actualize the best we can our own potentials, our own best potentials, and best again has to do with living for me in harmony with nature and to the extent accessible with one another and with our own true selves.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Reflections on Living Well podcast, where we explore perspectives on the good life in the 21st century. I am your host, Broderick Rodell. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, we have a special guest, Mitch Hall. Mitch has had a long life dedicated to service, education, and social justice. He has played many diverse roles in his illustrious career, including educator, published author, translator, book editor, and wellness counselor, to name just a few. Mitch currently teaches qigong, taijiquan, meditation, and yoga practices he began cultivating over 50 years ago. Welcome, Mitch. How are you
Thank you,
doing?
Broderick. I'm doing well. So nice to see you and be here with you. How you doing?
Yeah, nice to be here with you as well.
Good.
I'm doing good.
Good.
Looking forward to our conversation. It's always nice to
Likewise.
chat with you.
Same here.
And I know I just gave that little. Oh, thank you. I know I just gave that brief introduction. Can
Yeah.
you tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you like to describe yourself?
Oh gosh, you did a good job of it. I kind of, I just like to meet people and let them figure out who I am directly from how we interact. But, I do my best to be warm and kind but also to be discerning about who's there and how sincere they are, of course. That's one thing I've had to learn the hard way, that we can't assume everybody has, everyone's best interest at heart. So I tend to be trusting and I do really feel we're all
True.
here to help one another and, to learn the ways of being decent and good and kind and, when appropriate, as loving as possible. And so that's really essential to me in whatever roles I've been in. And you've summed up some of them, but, it's been a long journey and about to turn 81 at the end of this month, and so I'm happy to still be here. I give thanks for every day, and happy for the aspects of lifestyle and the practices I've cultivated and found along the way that are helping me to still be on my 2 feet. Can't take it for granted.
That's great. This is true, and I take your word for that.
Yeah.
So I'm sure we'll unpack a little bit more of your story, but I like to ask at the beginning of the podcast, what is your view on the good life? What does the good life mean to you, or what does living well mean to you? And then subsequently, we'll unpack it a little bit more. But just what does that look like for you in general?
Wow. Yeah. Whew. How many years do we have to go through this? I mean, this is the perennial questions of philosophers and good has both an ethical connotation, moral and ethical, in terms of do no harm or don't do to others what you wouldn't have others do to you, et cetera, et cetera. And it's been expressed in various words over the millennia, really, as long as humans have been here, and in stories too. So I think for the good life, it means to actualize the best we can our own potentials, our own best potentials, and best again has to do with living for me in harmony with nature and to the extent accessible with one another and with our own true selves, and not and you know, the hero's journey is kind of the return to, I mean, as it's been described by the mythologists, it's a return to being one's own true self, despite all the pushes and the pulls around us to have us fit in with someone else's preconceived notions or roles or modes, and to actualize as many of our own potentials. And it's going to be a little different for each person. And but for me, to learning to live well is to really discover what is our own true nature, and and how we're connected with. We're never separated. You know, this air we breathe, the food we eat, we're never separated from all that breathes and lives and all that is. And we need to take care of our bodies, our minds, our relationships, and also whatever our early life circumstances are. That's often shaped us before we were able to be conscious about it. And so we need to take what we're given and do the best with it, and fulfill, you know, whatever it is. So I always love this verse from the song Anthem, um, by Leonard Cohen, you know, ring the bells that still can ring. Forget your perfect offering. There's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. And so sometimes it's from healing the wounds that have come along the
Mm.
way, the emotional wounds, the relational wounds, even the physical ones, and then forget about perfection, but creating with what we've been given the most out of that. And the other day I came to tears. I just saw there's a guy in I think he's in France, who plays piano in public, and then sometimes people come along and ask if they can play with him. And there was a little girl in a wheelchair with a breathing tube. She was I think 17, and she asked if she could play with him, and he didn't know what to expect. She pulled out a violin, and her teacher was with her, and there she was, you know, with a sort of a rare muscular disability, and there she was playing the violin. She was living well. And
Mm.
amazing,
Beautiful.
amazing. It brought me to tears, you know. There's a lot of stories like that where people, given whatever the disabilities are, whatever the early wounds are, heal from it enough and still manifest that creative beauty of the human spirit. Boy, that's wonderful. Yeah. More examples are coming to
Mm.
mind, but I could just go on the whole
That's
hour
awesome.
about that. So,
That that's great. I think that that's what this is for
yeah,
me and the audience to kind of hear these stories, these perspectives, because this is,
yeah,
you know, the idea here is to unpack, as you unpack your personal philosophy, your own narrative and story around life, and then also, and in
mhm,
particular, what the good life is and what living well is. You're going to unpack and
mhm,
share various stories, various metaphors
yeah,
to share with us, so that we can gain some insight, some wisdom from a person who's lived 81, almost 81 years of life
yeah.
on this planet. So I just think that there's something valuable to that.
Well,
So
thanks.
you said
Thanks
a
for the
lot there. I
opportunity.
think you know, this finding our purpose. Yeah, it's finding your
Yeah,
purpose, finding some
yeah,
meaning and significance in life. You talked about all kinds of different features of that, and I you know, I know this is a big question too, but go as much as you like, and share as much detail as you like. But where did this come from? What do you think this came from? What helped you
wow.
see the world this way?
You know, early on, I just started questioning how things are because I didn't quite fit some of and I had some early adversity, but luckily I didn't start with that kind of early adversity, and I didn't, and it didn't last that long. But so first of all, I was born 1942, the end of 1942, when World War II was happening, as we know, very badly. And my mother was the older of two children of Jewish immigrants from Eastern Europe, and one of my maternal grandma, came by way of London first, and the shadow of World War II hung over some of my earliest memories, because my mother's younger brother Ray, just about a year and a half younger, he went off to the battlefield in Europe and was very badly wounded there, and but survived, and got all kinds of medals for heroism and so on. But I just remember the fear of my grandmother had, when would he even come back alive, and my grandfather reassuring her that he was in a field hospital and they knew how to take care of him and he'd be all right, and he was, and they were Jewish, and then I learned early on that, well, the Jews were among the targets of the Nazis for extermination. So, that raised a lot of questions. I was told I was Jewish, but I had a non-Jewish father whom I didn't even know at the time, because, he's a very successful businessman and executive who basically dumped my mom and thereby me when she was still pregnant with me. And so, a lot of stories. So this was some
Mm.
adversity. And when I was a little kid, none of the other kids I knew had divorced parents, whereas nowadays it's a 50-50 chance, among kids it's a lot more common. But at any rate,
Yeah.
so they were telling me I was Jewish, but I knew as a young kid, well, there was this non-Jewish father, and does that mean I have two different kinds of ingredients mixed in me? And then when I was about to go into second grade, my mom married an Orthodox Jewish guy, and I had to move away with her from my secure home with her and my grandparents in Philadelphia and my friends I had there to Detroit. And this guy was an Orthodox Jew who was extremely violent and abusive toward me. And I won't go into the details now, but I was a traumatized young
Mm.
kid. And his mother lived right upstairs. She owned the building, and she was very mean and abusive also. And it's like, whoa. And in the basement of the building, there was like a rundown apartment where an African American woman, a widow, who washed other people's clothing, and for a living. And the stepfather forbade me to ever associate with her. But my mother was really knew this was a good woman, and she let me go down there when he wasn't around. And Lily befriended me, and I would hang out with her. And as a little kid in second grade, I would start making, while she was ironing people's clothes and hanging them and folding them, I would tell her stories, and she would laugh. And I felt loved, I felt safe with her. Whereas upstairs in the apartment, while I was living with the new stepfather, I was being beaten. I was being locked in a room all day without any food, without any toys, without any books, without anything, without any radio. And I was being, really abused for no good reason at all. So that started me questioning more about this whole identity thing of human beings, like what's Jewish, what's Christian, what's white, what's but because it didn't all make sense. And then who am I? Because I would think, well, I must have these two different ingredients in me. But I'd look into people's eyes. I said, we're all human beings. So that was one thing that got me questioning. And then my mom, I wasn't learning to read that year, and the school principal basically told my mom I was retarded. So she didn't believe it. So she taught me to read and always told me books are your friends. So after we got out of there, after the one school year, I just read a lot. I was reading a lot. I was reading a lot. And the public library was like going to a palace. It was full of so many treasures. And, as a young kid, I just would read a lot and question a lot. And just, and so by the time I was entering sixth grade, they gave a citywide reading exam. And back then when people said, are you going to go to college? I said, I don't know. I guess if I'm smart enough. I had no clue. And then um, when we took the results of the citywide reading exam came in, my teacher, who was the first male teacher I ever had, so I didn't have my own dad. I had this terrifying, stepfather. And so having a male teacher was a big deal, he who could have been my dad. And then he called me aside. He said, Mitch, your reading score came in and you're reading above college graduate level. And I was just in the beginning of saying, oh my God, so I didn't even know what it meant. I just knew I loved summer vacation because I could even read more books than I could during the school year. so, So I think that also, opened wide, vast worlds of, possibility to me, and just knowing, and I was always felt I'm not just a member of one tribe or one race or I'm just human. Everybody's just human, but we all have our histories and all. Not to deny that at all, but to respect it and to learn. So that's been one of my quests has been, to learn about other cultures and to learn these practices that come from other cultures. I mentioned the qigong, the tai chi, the meditation, the yoga, and then I spent 2 years as a Peace Corps volunteer in West Africa, in a small country called Togo, where French was my main language, and I can still speak it to this day. But it was like, but I went to learn. I didn't have any grandiose ideas. I'm going to change very much, but I was of service. I was helping. One of the things I did there, I still remember most fondly, is there was a little boy, not a little boy, he was a high school husky guy, but his legs were all withered because poorly trained paramedics had injected uh, into his sciatic nerves and paralyzed his legs as a kid. And so he was crawling on hands and knees to school every day, 2 times a day, because
Mm.
they would always go home for lunch. And so anyhow, I brought to that town through Peace Corps office and some charitable organization the first wheelchair that ever been seen there, and that was just like something. At least it was tangible. And the first day he sat in that chair, I wrote a poem about it and still have the pictures of when he was first sitting in that chair, and then he could start going to school upright rather than crawling to school, and his schoolmates. So I felt good about that. Some small
Mm.
contribution, and also to learn from the local people, and that's what I've been doing all my life. So in my roles, I've been an international student advisor at a couple of universities, whatever. But I just wanted to learn from, and then literature, you know, poems, novels, philosophy. That's been just a lifelong quest to learn, and from the sciences too, from psychology, from neurobiology. It's just been. I've always felt, this life. It's a miracle. I can't figure it all out, but I'm just, as long as I can breathe, I want to keep learning and meeting beautiful people, and just being as kind as possible, because we never know who's going through a hard time. And even sometimes for a stranger, if we smile at them, just because it's sincere, it's not fake, it just comes because we're happy to see them, happy they're alive. And I know there were some times when I went through real difficult times, and sometimes I just be in a store and then all of a sudden the cashier would just, I felt there was a little spark of human kindness there that gave me hope. There's better situations and better times to come and all. So every bit of kindness, and of course, I have gone through hard times, and I'm thankful for my teachers. I'm thankful for my friends. I have one friend. We've known each other since we were both 14, and that, if you subtract 81 minus 14, you got quite a few
Mm.
years of friendship. Thank God we're both still alive, and whatever we've been through, can talk with each other. And I had some therapists. I went because of that, all that trauma in my early life, and then some later relationship issues that inevitably follow when there's all that unhealed early trauma. I had to go into several years of psychotherapy, and I found some good therapists, some wonderful ones that really helped, and some that were, not so good. It's all part of the learning. And so I'm just, being really honest about it. Um, and I thank Mr. Frankel, my sixth grade teacher, because he recognized some things in me that I didn't recognize. And when there was a time in the spring, the last semester of elementary school, sixth grade, where there was going to be the class play of the year, like the school play, and so they needed a sixth grader to take the lead role, and he asked me to do it. I said, and I had not done any acting before. I said, why me? And he said something to me that I didn't even know about. He said, because you'll be able to remember the lines. So again, he recognized something in me. And then in high school, I had an English teacher, Miss Dorothy Sullivan. Bless her and thank her. And she also recognized some things in me. And when I was in her classes, her English classes, for the first time ever, she taught a class in that high school, the first time in that high school, on world literature, where we weren't only reading the English and the American authors, we were reading the poetry from China and Japan, and some of the mythology from India. And like, man, I just loved that course. It was a big influence on me. And in the senior year, we also they had one day where each teacher would choose one of the seniors to replace him or her for the day, like whether it was geometry or whether it was, physics or chemistry. And so I was one of the people who competed with Miss Sullivan. Who put in my bid, and then there was another guy who had been the star in all the school shows. Oh boy, that's a big star. Who am I? But she chose me to be her for a day. And I think that was also one of the influences that led me into a career that's mostly been involved with education in one form or another, that secondary or university or grad school or adult, education. And now it's all these movement arts that have helped keep me going. So I think there's been I even forget your question, but I'm just riffing. I hope it's relatively coherent. But there have been some people in my life, the teachers. Of course, my mom was a big influence too, and who have helped keep me going and keep trusting myself. Friends, teachers, therapists, associates, and everything. That we're all here to help each of us to become our own best self. We really need one another. Yeah. So I mean, that's one of the big lessons. And when I was
Mm.
in a PhD program in psychology, which I didn't complete because of I took a very difficult job and I felt it needed my full attention at that point. I took a course in relationships and health and healing practice. And, the literature review confirmed what I had already experienced in my life, that just as much as diet, the nutrition and the exercise and various good health habits, we really need healthy, mutually supportive, respectful, kind, loving, empathic, and for real relationships where we get called out on our stuff too, but in a loving way so that we can really grow and learn. So for
Yeah.
me, it's lifelong learning, and I'm still in there, man. I'm not complete. I'm not finished. I'm praying for healing in different realms, relational and in the world around us and all. And so I've just put together some free association, and I hope something's coming through. I went on for a while. It all
S-
just started spilling
Sounds
out.
great. It's okay. That's great. I think
Help make sense out of all this.
so. I'll try to say a few things about. Yeah, no, it's great. I think that that's
Okay,
what's important. I like it, and I think
good.
allow yourself to just be on the spot, reflecting on the things that have influenced and shaped you. And, you
Yeah,
started off in the beginning talking about adversity and how
yeah,
challenge has played a role, and
yeah.
sometimes we can hold on to those traumatic experiences, but as you went through life, you realize that holding on to those traumatic experiences or not doing anything to kind of help deal with those experiences uh,
Hmm.
can hinder us as we go through life. But not holding on to them, but also reflecting on them in the sense that that challenge inspired you to find a passion in literature, or
Yeah.
to find or to see someone else in your life, like the African American woman that lived below you all, to find some inspiration
Hmm.
and to have an exemplar in your life who was kind, who's willing to listen to you. These things are important in shaping and molding a person. Even
Yeah.
those hard things, life
Yeah.
full of challenge. You didn't choose to be born in this situation, but you were in that situation, and you had exemplars in your life with
Yeah.
your mother primarily, and
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
other folks in your life, teachers. Well, you
Yeah.
said another thing, being acknowledged, having someone to acknowledge you, to
Mm.
instill confidence in you, just by believing in you. So important, and to have
Yeah.
multiple educators in your life too that do that for you. So
Hmm.
you touched on a whole lot of things that are really important. Education and learning. I mean, for me, this whole podcast is about that. So I don't have a
Mm.
problem you riffing off on your story, because I think through the life of another person, through another person's story, we learn so much.
Yeah.
And that's what literature is. Literature
Yeah.
books are stories that a person is telling us, a particular viewpoint that they have, and you get to
Yeah.
open yourself up. And I saw the joy as you spoke about the importance of expanding your world through literature. It's amazing what it does for you and open you up
Mm,
to see that, oh, there's more than just what I've experienced in the world. There's a
yeah.
very big, large world out there, and there are so many ideas, and there's kindness out there in the world, and there's different viewpoints on that. I think
Mm-hmm.
all of
Mm-hmm.
that is important. I mean, again, you touched on a lot of things. Friendship, and in
Mm-hmm.
relationships, and how important relationships is to live in a good
Mm-hmm.
life. So, a lot of the questions I would have asked you anyway is centered around those various things that you already brought up. Um,
Wow.
so
I'm glad.
no problem whatsoever from my perspective, Mitch.
Thanks, Roderick. Well, that was beautiful, empathic
So let's say,
reflection for me. I feel very acknowledged and heard, listened to, and recognized by you here and now. Thank you. It's a gift. There was a Jewish
well, thank you,
philosopher,
Mitch.
Martin Buber, who
We're
said,
trying here.
oh, go on. Yeah, there's just a quote comes to mind from Buber. It's a quote. It says, "It's from one human being to another that the heavenly bread of self-being is passed." And to me, that's partly right. It's
Hmm.
from one human being to another that the heavenly bread of self-being is passed. It's through I and you and I, that we come into the fullness of our being, and yeah, and whether it's from good and solid early beginnings where hopefully there was enough love and support, or later on. And I also think the adversity, it's often healing the wounds of the adversity we faced, really healing that, and that we bring some of the best, metaphorically speaking, medicine that we have to offer just by being ourselves.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly. We don't have to be a prisoner to the woundedness,
No,
and
that's
we don't have
right.
to celebrate it. We don't have to
Hallelujah.
celebrate our woundedness. And
No, not at
I think
all. Yeah.
sometimes I think I think that, no, I think there's some good intentions behind this, but I think there's
Yeah.
this there's a subtle celebration of woundedness and victimhood, where I
Yeah.
think like where you're celebrating or you're speaking about how from that woundedness you found
Mhm.
something else that has
Yes.
enlivened and brightened your life. And I think
Yes.
for me, that's an example of what's possible. Now, even if someone who's listening to this, who
Mhm.
feels like they're stuck in something, there's something they haven't quite been able to overcome. But I think in that woundedness, in the suffering that we've experienced, we can gain some insight. And it
Mhm.
looks like for you, I mean, I'm sure there's many other things as well.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
the one thing that really stands out for me is that through that kind of traumatic abuse, I felt that way in my life at certain moments,
Mhm.
where there was a challenge, a person really pushing, challenging me when I didn't feel like it was necessary. But I looked to other individuals, other people stepped up,
Mhm.
teachers, coaches. They step
Yes.
up in your life and just share with you plant some positive seed in you. That is so big. It's so huge
It really
to have
is. Yeah.
those individuals in our lives.
It's
Yeah.
really
And if
definite.
you haven't found that person, it's okay to go out,
Yeah.
look for that person, and they
Yeah.
might be there close to you, a friend, like you say, or an educator, a mentor of some sort. It'd be very
Yeah.
important piece of the puzzle.
Well said. I agree with
Yeah.
you. Yeah. It's
And also
beautiful.
literature education.
Mhm.
You've said, I know you've spent a lot of your life in education. I'm very much interested in education. Can you
Mhm.
elaborate a little bit more on why you see that as so valuable? You've touched on it, but I would like to hear a little bit more about that.
Wow. Wow. Um, again. some of my most important exemplars have been teachers, but often when I'm faced with some challenges these days, a few lines of verse that I may have read, 50, 60 years ago, some poems, or some figures, some world literature come to mind that give me very, important lessons. And, I had a sort of, when I was younger, because I did well in school. And so I thought, well, the career for me is, it's going to be involving the intellect. But I always enjoyed doing some sports. I love dancing. And that was just kind of on the side. And here I am in my early 80s doing, feeling so good to teach, qigong, tai chi, yoga, meditation. It's fully embodied. And then I remember a verse I had read probably in early 1960s of the last verse of a poem called Among School Children by William Butler Yeats. And it says, labor is blossoming or dancing where the body is not bruised to pleasure soul, nor beauty born out of its own despair, nor blear-eyed wisdom out of midnight oil. O chestnut tree, great-rooted blossomer, are you the leaf, the blossom, or the bowl? O body swayed to music, O brightening glance, how can we know the dancer from the dance? And those last lines are, very frequently said, but it's like when you get into a flow state, when I get into a flow state, and hopefully, it happens with my students and all, where we're just, you can't know the dancer, we're just in the flow. A different kind of awareness and beingness opens up, a different kind of connection with the trees that we're breathing with. They're giving us the oxygen, we're giving them the carbon dioxide, that, we're dancing with all of life. I mean, those images from literature, and the Yeats verse is just one early one where, I heard it, I knew it, and all that. And then a verse from Lao Tzu's Tao Te Ching. My favorite undergraduate course was in the second semester, the last semester of my undergraduate years at Columbia. It was visiting professor John C.H. Wu, a great Chinese scholar who wrote fluently in Mandarin, English, French, and German. And we studied, among other texts, his own translation of Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu. And so here comes the importance of literature and the whole human heritage. There's a verse in there that he translated as, um, you know, the ancients, from way before he was, or he, she, whoever they were, whoever Lao Tzu is, it's a legendary figure. From the ancients used to say, a man of violence comes to a violent end. Whoever said that can be my ancestor. Whoever said that can be my ancestor.
Hmm.
So, and we have the treasures of human wisdom open to us now through books, through different media and everything, that we can find our ancestors, not, I mean, to be genuine about where we come from and honor that too. But Lao Tzu, yeah, that Taoist philosophy influences me so much, and I keep learning more from it. I've read that book in translation. Unfortunately, I don't know Mandarin so many times, and it's such simple verses, and I keep getting more and more understanding out of it, and actually having these embodied practices. I feel it's a way of practicing it, not just thinking it, or but it really opens up to and the meditative aspect to other aspects. And then I'll sometimes think of Don Quixote, because I've been a kind of an idealist who still believes in a world of peace and the ending of war. I still pray for it, and despite any evidence to the contrary. And so I think, well, there's something quixotic about my way of being in the world, but hey, even though Don Quixote is a fictional character, Cervantes was witnessing to something about despite all the hardships of life, my still romantic and still idealistic wishes. And, like my grandfather said, all the old people used to say, and now I say, where there's life, there's hope. So That's that renewal, that transcendent capacity of the human spirit. Or sometimes when there's all these voices coming in the mass media propaganda or whatever to do this or that. And then I think of Odysseus, who was, on his wanderings, and the ship was going to have to go through the dangerous passage of Scylla and Charybdis. And he knew that the sirens were singing, and he had to have himself tied to the mast so he wouldn't follow the sirens and shipwreck his ship. So I think of Odysseus, and not that I'm Odysseus, I'm just, another common mortal like the rest of us. But yeah, I don't want to just listen to those propaganda voices. I want to pause. I want to think for myself. I want to look at the evidence, and I want to realize there are all kinds of sirens singing to pull me this way and that. So these images from literature just come spontaneously, and they help me. you know, or when there's been some adversity, I think of one of the haiku poets who said, something about when my thatched roof of my hut burned down, and I could have a clearer view to the moon. I'm just paraphrasing, but it's like these things come to me that I've been reading over the years. And I didn't say I'm going to remember this, I'm going to remember that, but somehow they made impressions, and I'm thankful to all the witnesses of wisdom. And when I've had my own physical difficulties, I think of um, the painter Renoir, the impressionist painter Pierre-Auguste Renoir. He had crippling rheumatoid arthritis, which my mom suffered from for many years at the end of her life, and may she rest in peace. And I read his story, and one thing I saw that, and this has to do with finding our purpose. In his later years, he was in a lot of pain. His joints were gnaw. Some of his masterpieces he painted when he couldn't even hold a paintbrush anymore, and so they would tape the paintbrush to his wrist. His hand would be, and he painted some of his later masterpieces. And his son Jean Renoir, who wrote a beautiful
Hmm.
book, memoir, Renoir Mon Père. I'm sorry, Renoir my dad, my father. He said that while Renoir was painting, he wasn't feeling the pain. He wasn't in agony. He was in the flow, and so he was living well, even though he was very ill. And again, that's another example that sometimes, what as I say, we have our ideal of what's living well, but no one's guaranteed. But given that we have life, and given that we have a sense of purpose, and that was what Viktor Frankl, the existential psychologist who founded logotherapy, found, that he was, a Jew who was imprisoned in Nazi concentration camps, and he found that having a sense of purpose that was beyond just oneself often helped some people survive better than others. That this was, very important to his logotherapy, that living well is like living for a purpose. And then that reminds me of sayings from a rabbi who was, I think, an older contemporary of Jesus, Rabbi Hillel, who summed up for him the teachings of his spiritual path, was in three questions. If I'm not for myself, who will be? If I'm for myself alone, what am I? If not now,
Mm-hmm.
when? And so those three teachings,
Mm-hmm.
those three questions summed up his teaching of what his religion, his spiritual path was about. That we need to take care of ourselves to the best possible, our bodily health, our financial, at least relative stability. And for me, for better or worse, it's never been about getting rich. I mean, just there were other kinds of riches, the riches of friendship, the riches of health, of good health, the riches of doing creative altruism, and just sharing and caring. That's the beauty of life. But we do have to take care of ourselves. Yeah, no one else is going to do it, and we also have to learn. Learn painfully sometimes about what our faults and blind spots have been, and try to overcome them. But if that's all we're doing, then what are we? And that's why people sometimes, the super wealthy and everything, like they can never have enough because they're never satisfied. Or the people who just seek fame, but they're hollow on the inside, and they have the adulation of throngs and fans from all over the world, maybe, but do they know the love that comes from a real relationship, that is intrinsically gratifying? So if we're only for ourselves alone, what are we? We're no. That's not the essence of our humanity, which is in loving one another to the extent that we can, but also in being with people who are capable of reciprocating. And then, if
Hmm.
not now, when? Well, that's a big. At my age, I better think more about some of my projects I need to do, because if I'm going to get some of that writing done and I keep not doing it day after day, neither don't stop kidding myself and say, let it go. Who needs it? I better get to it sooner rather than later, because there may not be any later, at this age. So there's a lot of wisdom in that, in
Hmm.
those three questions also. But just sometimes getting through a day peacefully, I'm
Exactly.
just grateful for that. I'm just grateful for that. I hope this made relative sense, because I was just
Hmm.
following the
This is
Ariadne's thread wherever it went.
lovely. In my opinion, lovely. I hope the audience enjoyed that. I think that, I mean, that's what this is about, Mitch. Um,
Thanks, Broderick. Thanks.
that's
Thanks
what
for
this
the
is about.
opportunity. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
about, no, it's seriously about you,
Hmm.
yeah, to share your story. And I think,
Yeah.
I don't want to, there's lots of questions I can ask within that, but I think, or, like, oh, stop, focus on that. I'm like, no, let it go. I think sometimes when we allow ourselves to express that, there's an
Yeah.
authenticity that comes out. And you shared so many nuggets about how to live well and what creates the favorable conditions for living well. And again, I was just mentioning about literature and books and how you started this dialogue off about how you sought out things from different perspectives. The
Yeah.
you just didn't read, say, Western literature. You read all kinds of things. You just didn't read prose. You just didn't read scientific literature. You read it
Right.
all, and I
Yeah.
think there's something, the poetry that you remember that has had a significant impact on
Hmm.
your trajectory. And as you're
Yeah.
sitting at 80, 81 essentially years of
Yeah.
age, you're reflecting on those sweet, um, say sweet, I guess, deep, profound
Mm.
works of literature that has had such an amazing impact on your life. And sometimes we don't even know how those things have an impact on our lives until much later.
Yes.
And I
That's
think you're
right.
reminding us of that. Like, just keep
Yeah.
at it. Keep studying, keep expanding our minds and opening ourselves to different interpretations and different perspectives. And
Yeah.
so that's the reason why I'm doing this podcast, is to
Beautiful.
open myself up and the audience up to different perspectives and to hear you pretty much articulate that very clearly,
Mm.
the value that has had in your life, and
Yeah.
opens you up to various technologies. Reading can be very abstract, yet it
Mm.
contributes to our narrative, the story we tell about ourselves, and it opens us up to different technologies. Different, when I say technologies, I'm talking about like psychotechnologies or
Yeah.
physical technologies that can help us live
Mm.
healthier and live well.
Yeah.
Ways of thinking about ourselves through literature, through poetry. Those are
Mm.
very valuable things, I think, that you share. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Those are valuable things that I think that you share, that I'm definitely going to take home from this conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm happy to hear that. And it's just been the
Keep,
way I've rolled. And, you know, just those interests there were probably many other influences. I know there were that, I haven't even come around to mentioning yet, that just, I kept searching and just, discovering. And, it is time for harvesting some of it now, and at least imparting something of this spirit that I've managed to live with despite whatever came along the way. And thanks to it also. It's
yeah,
paradoxical. Kind of goes together. Yeah, these
that's
are very
right.
I treasure
Thanks
your
to it
reflections,
all.
Roderick. Yeah, thanks.
Excuse me.
That's it. That's it. Yeah, yeah.
Mm. I like how
So
you
yeah,
just said too. It's there's always going to be challenge.
yeah,
It's always life is always going to be full of challenges, but having
yeah,
those resources available to us is so crucial. And you slipped in there, the various methodologies, technologies. I'm just using those terms interchangeably
sure.
there. About the activities that you do, the various practices that you engage in,
Yeah.
from qigong to tai chi and
Hmm.
yoga meditation. Can you say a few more about why those things, how those things help you live a good life?
Wow. Well, because I mean, there's first of all, I just experience it that I feel better. So that's prima facie evidence. It's self-validating, and
Mm-hmm.
my mind does get quieter. And I've been able to also, in silent meditation retreats, face some of the, the ruminations that just were not serving me any good, and said, why am I just going on and on like that? Let go of all those, nasty people who said this and that, and just be thankful, man. And but there's a research study that was done by the John W. Brick Foundation. It's available for free in terms of scientific validation. It's called Move Your Mental Health. Now, we know about the physical benefits of exercise. Most people are more focused on that, but they reviewed the peer reviewed literature on yoga, qigong, and tai chi, walking in nature, resistance training, and all. And what was documented in terms of the mental health benefits, it's huge. And also, in terms of, getting older,
Mm-hmm.
when we're learning new movement patterns, new practices, and we need to keep the fluids of our body circulating. And we have a very sedentary civilization where we have these comfortable chairs and we can just, and we have these tubes and, the TV and the all the screens we could look at endlessly and just sit there, and then all the fluids get stagnant and we're not moving. And so I've been, if people see me moving around, I'm actually standing for this interview because during the shutdown and everything, I got into sitting too much. I said, that's not good. And some people say sitting is the new smoking or whatever. Too much of it. I mean, we can sit fine, but we also need to, keep our spines mobile and all the fluids, the cerebrospinal fluid and the lymph and the blood, we need to keep it going. So part of the reason I'm moving around is I don't, I had my injuries, I had my tough time. So I want to keep this body mobile. But anyhow, the mental health benefits for, I mean, good exercise is better, according to the research, than all these antidepressive medications and all. And also walking in nature, just being with trees, walking under, you don't have to do anything, just be there, just sit, just walk. Within 20 minutes, cortisol levels go down. The immune system is ramped up. And I could look in the books and cite the statistics, and you feel better. And that's a subjective evidence. But I think it's in terms of, the word healing relates to becoming more whole, complete, full. And I find these embodied movement practices, um, and with a meditative component of them, help us heal, to become more whole, that these artificial divisions between mind and body and all, they just disappear because we are being, and we're coming from a deeper awareness that's not just conditioned and programmed. We're in the moment more and everything. And so for me, it's been in part an antidote to maybe the overly intellectual tendencies I've had, as a younger guy. Because I remember when I took my first yoga class. My mom had books about yoga, and she had explored it a little bit when I was a kid, and so. On her, the autobiography of a yogi was there, and something was it the voice of the masters or something about meditating and this hidden sound emerges or something. But whatever, she had So I remember I was teaching in an inner city school in Manhattan. It was a really rough school year, and I won't go into the history there, but there was a citywide teacher strike, and I was one of the young teachers who opened the school. Even I actually literally opened it with a crowbar to when the teachers for union shut it down, and because I believe the local communities deserve control of their schools, and so it's a whole historical moment, and so it was very stressful. And so Swami Satchidananda was, the first yogi I came across live, was giving free talks at town hall every Friday evening. And I started going there. I enjoyed his stories. I enjoyed his being and everything. And his first Integral Yoga Institute was just a few blocks walk from where I was living. So I remember my first yoga class. This was 1968, I think. And the first Shavasana, just lying still, it was like blissful. I hadn't experienced that. And back then they were teaching after each asana, each yoga form, they would do a little mini Shavasana. And so it was really a lot of deep rest, and that felt good. But I was still young. I was in my later 20s, I think. So I started getting
Mm-hmm.
into the physicality of it and thinking yoga was about being able to do all these contortions and all these balance things and everything. So I brought that Western, sort of competitive, athletic mentality for it, so, which inevitably leads to hurting myself. So I was so proud I could do. That's not what yoga is. And I always would like to tell my students,
Mm-mm.
just don't hurt yourself. Don't force anything. Don't try to look like anything. Just feel from the inside. And yoga begins and continues with the very first ethical principle of yoga,
Mm-hmm.
which is ahimsa, non-violence, non-injury, non-harm. Let's not do it to ourselves because we think we're supposed to look some way or there's nothing to achieve. It's just to benefit the body with what the body needs in the moment. And that
Mm-mm.
means we need to be in touch and moving from the inside. And so the teacher's words and demonstrations are just invitations to explore and see, does this suit my night now or not? So anyhow, it helps really keep me going. It helps keep me balanced. I know from a point of view of, neurobiology, it helps integrate the functioning of the two hemispheres and get us more in touch with our hearts. And because the movement and the heart and sensing is more right hemisphere mediated, whereas the left hemisphere is the one that comes up with all these theories and maps of everything, and people can get rigidly attached to that. But the map is not the territory, as Alfred North Whitehead and Korzybski had said, way early
Mm-hmm.
20th century. That is, we need to be in touch with reality, and I feel these practices are so beneficial for all aspects of our physical being, but also our emotional and psychological functioning. They balance us out. They calm down the stress response. They also help us come alive from the sort of the dissociation where we really, we get very alienated from our bodies. In fact, God, I mean, when I was a kid in school, all the desks until high school, they were bolted to the floor. We were supposed to sit there still and just pay attention to some teacher up there. And kids need to move their bodies. Kids need to interact. These need to play. And God, recess was the blessing of every school day. And I just remember,
Right.
sometimes just looking at that clock, how much until, what is it, 3 o'clock comes. So anyhow, a long-winded, rambling answer to your question, I find I need these practices as well as time in nature. I really need. That's always been one of my savings wherever I was, wherever my job was, whatever, just to be hearing the birds, seeing the way the sunlight comes through the translucency of the leaves or reflects off of them, and the play of the light on the water and the waves and how the birds move. I mean, it's just the whole, there's just something irreplaceable that we need that. And so much in this civilization has become synthetic and isolating people away from it and all that. So, and these mindful movement practices restore us at their best if we're gentle and nonviolent about it, to that flow and to the being, and then to letting the truth of our being open up. And there's no end to discovery as far as I'm concerned. And it's a process, and keep in the flow and keep going. So did that more or less address the question? So the benefits are holistic, they're physical, they're emotional, they're
Definitely. I love how
psychological,
you
and spiritual. Go on. Yeah.
awesome. I'm glad that you ended that with of being in flow and getting into flow. I
Yeah.
think for me the good life is or living well, being in flow more and more is a
Yeah.
major part of it. And I think all of these things that you're speaking of, they create the favorable conditions for flow. They create
Yeah.
the favorable conditions to be so connected with yourself in each moment,
Mm.
deeper aspects of yourself, not just your story about yourself that the world is trying to appeal to.
Mm,
And then
yeah.
we get caught up in that little self, that story about ourselves, and forget that there's something more. And I think when we go into flow like states, they remind us that, oh, I'm not just this image of myself, this identity that I've created,
Yeah.
which is important in navigating the world and playing the game of life
Yeah.
out in the world, but it's not who we are only.
Right.
And there's something that happens when we get into flow like
Mm.
states or these flow like attributes that we can get through meditative practices, the various physical practices from different traditions.
Mm.
There's just so much out there to learn and to gain from, and it goes back to what you said in the beginning: educating ourselves, learning. You can
Yeah.
learn through literature, you can learn
Hmm.
through podcasts such as this. There's all types
Yeah.
of things out there, avenues to learn and to expand our minds, to find out different ideas about how to live a better life. So
Mm.
this has been great, Mitch. I've loved all of the things that you've Mitch. You touched on so many different things and so many different aspects that I didn't have to prompt you. So I love that. I just get to primarily listen to you, allow the spirit to move through you. I love it. This has been great. We're coming to a close now, and yeah, I just think this has been awesome thus far. A final question I'll ask you: is there anything? Well, I two more questions. That'd be quick. The first one is, and maybe they can go together. Uh, do you have anything else you would like to say about the good life? Any final thoughts about the good life? And you can tie into that. Is anything you like to leave the audience with? Is there any suggestions based on your life experience? You can tie those two together. So, final thoughts about the good life and anything you would like to leave the audience with.
I'm just feeling warmth in my heart, and I'd like to leave the audience with I'm very thankful to you, Broderick, for what we've shared in the past and this renewal of the communication, the dialogue between us and what we're sharing now. You've listened deeply and well. You've asked such meaningful questions, and you give me a chance to share something of my spirit. And, maybe a lot of the words I've said will be forgotten, but maybe the laughter will remain. and maybe and maybe the spirit will remain, and the openness to learning from one another throughout life, and to not, as you put it so well, not to get taken in by the sort of the limiting stories we might tell ourselves that are often based on stories other people have tried to get us to believe about ourselves, and to become free from that. Yeah. And that we're all human, we all need one another, and there are creative and peaceful, nonviolent ways of handling conflicts and dilemmas if only people will trust in that and seek them together with their fellows who with whom there is a good established basis for trust. And so I'm super thankful to you. This means a lot to me, and I hope it will mean something to others. And I know it means a lot to you. And I'm really thankful that you learned the technology it takes to go do this kind of thing. I said, wow, this is a lot that goes into creating a podcast series and all the, the back end of it. But you've kept it human-hearted also with your warmth and your smile and your brilliant intelligence, and you're being present for me, and you've made it easy for me, Broderick, because I feel a lot of trust in you, and big thanks and deep love. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mitt. That was very kind and generous of you. And this has been, again, lovely. A lot of wisdom that you've shared. And I hope the audience has found this as enjoyable and lovely as I have found it. So thank you again, Mitch. Looking forward to talking with you more offline. And I just love you, man. And take care of yourself.
Thank you.
Until next
Likewise.
time.
Peace and blessings. Till next time. Yay.
Thank you so much for tuning into the show. I hope this conversation has inspired you to reflect on your own views of the good life. If you enjoyed the show and want to hear more inspiring and thought-provoking conversations, please follow, write a review, and rate us on your favorite podcast app. If you are tuning in on YouTube, please hit that like button and subscribe. Your support is very much appreciated.